There is a story inside the British royal family that has never been told the way it deserves to be told. Not the polished version that palace press offices release to the world. Not the carefully managed photographs of smiling royals waving from balconies. The real story. The one built from years of private tension, quiet confrontations, and a wound that never fully healed. It is the story of Prince William and the woman his father chose to love while his mother was still alive, still suffering, and still fighting for her place in a family that had already decided to move on without her. It is the story of Camilla. And it is the story of a young boy who grew up watching everything fall apart, and who is now, as a grown man standing at the edge of becoming king, being forced to decide what kind of monarch he will be, and what role, if any, that woman will play in the future he is building. This is not gossip. This is not tabloid speculation. This is the documented, verified, deeply human story of one of the most complicated relationships in modern royal history. And it starts as so many painful things do, not with a dramatic confrontation, but with silence. To understand what is happening inside the royal family today, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the polished beginning that official royal biographies prefer, where everything is framed in duty and dignity, but the real beginning. The one that involved three people in a marriage, a secret relationship that was anything but secret, and two young boys who were old enough to understand that something was wrong but too young to know what to do about it. Prince William was born on June 21, 1982. He was the first child of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and from the moment he arrived in the world, the pressure on him was immense. He was heir to the throne. He was the future. Everything about his life was mapped out before he was old enough to walk. But behind the golden doors of the palaces he grew up in, the picture was far from perfect. His parents' marriage, celebrated as the most romantic royal union of the 20th century, was fracturing in ways that the public would not fully understand for years. Princess Diana was a woman of extraordinary warmth and emotional depth. She connected with people in a way that was rare and genuine. She was also a woman who was deeply unhappy in her marriage, isolated within a royal system that did not know how to absorb her energy, and aware long before the public was that her husband's heart was elsewhere. That elsewhere had a name. That name was Camilla. Camilla Rosemary Shand was born on July 17, 1947, and her upbringing made her no stranger to royal life. She is a descendant of Alice Capel, the mistress of King Edward VII, and her family had always lived among the upper classes of British society. Her first meeting with Charles was at a polo match in 1970. After dating briefly, they decided to go their separate ways, Camilla marrying Andrew Parker Bowles, an army officer, in 1973, and Charles marrying Princess Diana in 1981. But the connection between Charles and Camilla did not simply disappear when they walked away from each other. It went underground. It waited. And by the mid-1980s, it had resumed in full, becoming an affair that would reshape the course of the British monarchy. Britannica. By the time William was a small child, the household he was growing up in was slowly becoming a war zone. Not a loud war. Not one with shouting in the corridors that servants could report. It was the quieter, colder kind of domestic collapse. The kind where two people stop speaking to each other with any real warmth, where there are separate schedules and separate social circles, and a kind of mutual exhaustion that children can feel even when they cannot name it. William felt it. By all accounts, he was a sensitive, perceptive child, deeply close to his mother, who noticed with the particular clarity that children sometimes carry that something in his home was broken. Diana was not sitting quietly through any of it. She was fighting. She was fighting for her marriage, then for her dignity, and eventually, when she understood that the marriage was beyond saving, for her story. In 1995, she gave an interview to BBC journalist Martin Bashir that shocked the entire world. She sat in front of the camera and said with deliberate, calm precision that there were three people in her marriage. She did not need to say the name. Everyone knew. After Princess Diana declared there were three of us in the marriage in 1995 and referred to Camilla as a Rottweiler, the press branded Camilla the most hated woman in Britain, a label she would struggle to shake off for years. The weak. William was 13 years old when that interview aired. Think about that for a moment. He was a teenager already carrying the weight of being the future king, already under the microscope of the British press, and he sat somewhere inside one of his family's residences and watched his mother tell the entire world that her marriage had been destroyed by another woman. That is not something a child forgets. That is not something that simply fades with time. It becomes part of the architecture of who you are. It shapes your instincts, your trust, your capacity for certain kinds of loyalty and certain kinds of forgiveness. 2 years after that interview, in the summer of 1997, Diana was killed in a car crash in a tunnel in Paris. William was 15 years old. He and his younger brother Harry learned of their mother's death in the early hours of the morning. What happened inside those boys in the days and weeks that followed is something that neither of them has ever been able to fully describe. Even decades later, even in the books and interviews and carefully arranged public appearances that were supposed to be about opening up and healing. The grief was total. It was enormous. And it landed on two young boys who were expected almost immediately to perform that grief in public, to walk behind their mother's coffin through the streets of London, to hold themselves together in front of billions of people watching from around the world. In the years that followed Diana's death, Charles and Camilla continued their relationship, now publicly, now without the pretense of discretion that the affair had required during Diana's lifetime. She was once regarded as the most hated woman in Britain for her role in the dissolution of Diana and Charles' marriage, and a 2006 poll by The Times showed that only 21% of the British public would be happy to have her as queen. Those numbers tell a story that no palace press release could soften. The British people had watched Diana suffer. They had watched her fight. They had watched her die. And they were not, in any large numbers, prepared to welcome the woman they held responsible for so much of that pain. OPB. William watched all of this from a careful distance. He had inherited something of his mother's emotional intelligence and something of his father's sense of institutional duty. He understood that becoming king meant making compromises, accepting certain realities, playing a very long game. He did not publicly attack Camilla. He did not give interviews assigning blame. But royal observers who watched him closely during this period noted something that was difficult to miss. When he was in the same room as Camilla, there was a stiffness about him, a formality that went beyond mere royal protocol. He was civil, he was correct, but he was never warm, not in the way that a stepson might be warm toward a step-parent he had genuinely come to accept. Royal biographer Christopher Anderson believes that William merely tolerates his stepmother, and that Camilla has always been a little afraid of him. Anderson argued that Kate Middleton and Charles' battle with cancer gave William a bit more perspective. But perspective, in this context, is not the same as peace. You can develop perspective about something painful and still carry the weight of it. You can understand intellectually why things happen the way they did and still feel, in quiet moments, the full original force of the injury. The Royal Observer. In 2005, Charles and Camilla married. William attended the ceremony. He stood where he was supposed to stand, and he did what was expected of him. Harry revealed in his memoir that he and William had urged their father not to marry Camilla. He wrote that despite Willie and him urging him not to, their father was going ahead, and they pumped his hand and wished him well. The brothers reportedly saw Camilla as a wicked stepmother and a villain. That is not a minor detail. That is two sons, still grieving their mother, standing before their father and asking him not to do the one thing he had decided was non-negotiable. And their father, loving them, understanding their pain, went ahead anyway. That moment told William something essential about where his feelings sat in the hierarchy of his father's priorities. They mattered, but they did not matter enough. The Royal Observer. Despite all of this, William did something remarkable in the years that followed. He chose, with deliberate and careful effort, to build a working relationship with Camilla. Not a loving one, not a natural, warm, familial one, but a functional one, a strategic one. Because he understood, with the long-range thinking of a man who knew he would one day be responsible for the entire institution, that open family conflict only damaged the crown he was going to inherit. He was not going to make his private grief into a public war. That was not who he was, and it was not what his mother would have wanted for him. Diana had wanted her sons to thrive. She had wanted them to be happy. She had not raised William to tear down the family she had loved, even at its worst in her name. But understanding something intellectually and making peace with it emotionally are two entirely different things. And as the years went on and Camilla's position within the royal family became more secure, more established, more publicly normalized, the quiet tension between her and William did not disappear. It simply changed shape. It became less about the past and more about the future, less about what Camilla had done and more about what she wanted. An insider revealed that Camilla wants Charles to hold onto the reins for as long as possible, as she loves her responsibilities and wanted to be queen her whole life, and hence does not want to let it go so fast. That desire, understandable as it is from a human perspective, sits in direct tension with William's own plans, because William has spent years preparing for the moment when he takes the throne. He knows exactly what kind of monarchy he wants to build. And it is not the same monarchy that his grandmother left behind or that his father has been maintaining. The list. One royal insider explained that William has been thinking about the future for years and knows that what his grandmother did and what his father does is an evolution. That evolution, as William sees it, requires a leaner, more modern, more purposeful institution. It requires decisions about who is essential and who is not. It requires the kind of clear-eyed assessment of the royal family's public role that sentiment cannot be allowed to distort. And somewhere inside that calculation, the question of Camilla becomes unavoidable. Yahoo! What does she mean to the future of the crown? What role does William intend for her once he is king? And what does Camilla herself believe she is entitled to? These are not small questions. They are questions with legal dimensions, constitutional implications, and deeply personal stakes for the people involved. They are also questions that, as of this moment, do not have settled answers. Which is precisely what makes the story ahead so significant. Because William is not yet king. Charles is still alive, still reigning, still committed to his wife and to her place by his side. King Charles formally bestowed the title of Vice Admiral of the United Kingdom on Queen Camilla, making her the first woman to hold the honorary title, a deliberate move by Charles to cement her position in a way that would outlast his own reign, to create a record and a precedent that would make it harder for anyone, including William, to quietly diminish her. Charles knows his son, he knows how William thinks, and he is doing what fathers do when they fear for the people they love. He is building protections. Yahoo! But protections built by one king do not always survive the next. The history of the British monarchy is full of moments where the certainties of one reign dissolved the moment a new sovereign took the throne. Titles can be reviewed. Roles can be reassigned. The power to shape the royal family's future belongs, ultimately, to whoever sits on the throne at the time. And that person in the not-too-distant future will be William. This is where part one ends, not with an announcement, not with a confrontation, but with a slow, careful, deeply human reckoning that is still very much in progress. A woman who fought her entire adult life to be accepted, to be respected, to step out from behind the shadow of one of the most beloved women in British history, sitting now at the height of her power, and aware, in the way that intelligent people are always aware of things they would rather not think about, that the clock is ticking. And a man who was once a 15-year-old boy walking behind his mother's coffin, now approaching the full weight of his inheritance, deciding with everything he carries and everything he knows, what kind of king he will be. The tension between those two truths is what drives everything that comes next. The British public has always had a complicated relationship with the idea of Camilla. For most of the 1990s, it was not complicated at all. It was simply hostile. She was, in the eyes of a grieving nation, the woman who had broken up a fairy tale. The woman whose name Diana had spoken with bitterness in a television interview watched by tens of millions of people. The woman who had been in the background of a marriage that was supposed to represent everything hopeful and romantic about the modern monarchy, quietly dismantling it from within. She was not just unpopular. She was, for a significant portion of the British public, genuinely despised. While Camilla dated Prince Charles prior to her marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla and Charles both faced massive criticism over resuming their intimate relationship in 1986, 13 years after her marriage and 5 years after his to Princess Diana. That timeline matters. It was not an impulsive thing. It was a sustained decision made over many years by two people who understood exactly what they were doing and who chose to continue anyway. That choice and its consequences for Diana is what the British public could not forgive. The mirror. By the time Charles and Camilla married in 2005, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Diana had been dead for 8 years. Time had done what it always does. It had not erased the grief or the anger, but it had softened some of its sharp edges. People who had once protested the very idea of Camilla were beginning, quietly and reluctantly, to accept that she was not going away. She was there. She was doing the work. She was showing up for the charitable engagements, the public appearances, the state events that constitute the daily machinery of royal life. And she was doing it without complaining, without demanding attention, without trying to compete with the memory of Diana. That restraint earned her some grudging respect. Although Camilla played a significant role in the breakup of Charles' first marriage, she eventually won over many Britons due to her down-to-earth style. She also softened Charles' hard edges and made him appear more approachable. That is no small thing inside the British royal family. Charles, for much of his public life, had struggled with his relationship with the press and with ordinary people. He came across as stiff, demanding, and out of touch in ways that his ex-wife had never been. Camilla, with her self-deprecating humor and easy social manner, helped smooth those edges in ways the palace had been trying and failing to achieve for decades. Fox News. Camilla is known for her self-deprecating humor and easygoing nature. And in the performative world of the British monarchy, where perception is everything and image is managed with extraordinary care, those qualities were genuinely valuable. She made Charles seem more human. She made his public appearances feel less like ceremonial obligations and more like real engagement. And slowly, year by year, the needle of public opinion began to move. Encyclopedia Britannica. But moving the needle is not the same as changing the destination. Recent polling demonstrates a measurable improvement in Camilla's standing compared with the backlash she faced in the 1990s, with approval around the mid-40% mark in some surveys and about 37% in others, indicating a slow normalization of her role as queen consort during King Charles III's reign. These figures show progress from earlier decades, but the numbers remain far from the broad, unquestioned popularity enjoyed by the Prince and Princess of Wales, who consistently top favorability charts. That gap is not incidental. It reflects something stubborn and structural in the way a significant portion of the British public still sees her. She has done the work. She has served. She has endured years of hostility with composure, and she still cannot close the distance between herself and the royals the public truly loves. Factually. It is in this context that the relationship between William and Camilla needs to be understood, because William is not just a man with a complicated personal history with his stepmother. He is also the person who reads these numbers. He is the person who thinks about the long-term credibility of the institution he is going to lead. And he knows, with the cool analytical intelligence that royal observers consistently attribute to him, that Camilla represents a particular kind of problem. She is neither fully embraced nor fully dismissed by the British public. She exists in a kind of permanent middle ground that is politically uncomfortable and strategically awkward. Behind the scenes, the friction between William and Camilla has been expressing itself in ways that are becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Prince William and Queen Camilla are divided over how much responsibility King Charles III should continue to shoulder as he undergoes treatment for cancer. William wants his father to slow down and take a proper step back. But every time he suggests it, Camilla gets in Charles' ear and convinces him it would be a disaster to show any weakness right now. That dynamic captures something essential about the power struggle that is quietly unfolding inside the palace walls. William is not just concerned for his father's health. He is concerned for the institution. He is looking at a king who is unwell and asking a reasonable question. Should a man in this condition be pushing himself through state banquets and diplomatic engagements? And Camilla is answering that question from a very different set of interests. If Charles steps back, if he withdraws from public life, the question of what his future looks like begins to merge with the question of what her future looks like. And that is a question she is not ready to answer. Yahoo! Camilla's focus on securing her future within the royal family has strained her relationship with William, who has lost trust in her. William is past the point of even trying to hide his distaste for Camilla. You can see it written all over his face whenever they are in the same room. That observation from someone close to the situation is striking precisely because William is a man trained from birth to manage his public expressions with extreme care. For that control to be visibly slipping in the presence of his stepmother suggests that whatever is building between them has moved past the point where sheer discipline can contain it. Yahoo! The tension between them reached a particular flashpoint around a state banquet that Charles hosted at Windsor Castle. William had concerns about the event going ahead at all given his father's health. Camilla had different concerns. She wanted the banquet to proceed. She wanted Charles to be seen as strong and in control. She got her way. And William, according to those who observed the fallout, was furious. Not just because of the decision itself, but because of what the decision represented. It told him that Camilla was operating from a set of priorities that were fundamentally about self-preservation rather than about what was genuinely best for Charles or for the family. And that kind of calculation, in William's world, is the thing he finds hardest to forgive. There is also the question of Kate. The Princess of Wales is not, by nature, a confrontational person. She is disciplined, composed, and deeply strategic in the way she manages her public image and her family's place within the royal hierarchy. But even Kate has not been immune to the friction that Camilla generates. Camilla has been extremely kind and supportive towards Kate throughout her recent struggles, but she's territorial by nature as well as prickly. It annoys her to no end that there's this narrative that the Waleses can do no wrong and that Kate can swan around whenever she feels like it, waving her magic wand and taking a self-appointed beau as the most popular member of the monarchy. Yahoo! That resentment, expressed by someone close to Camilla, is revealing. It suggests that underneath the composed exterior, Camilla is aware of the comparison being constantly drawn between herself and Kate, and that the comparison does not favor her. Kate is popular in a way Camilla has never been. Kate is loved in a way Camilla has never been. And Kate is the future in a way that Camilla, for all her years of patient waiting and careful positioning, is not. The way she behaved in front of everyone was uncalled for, and it raised William's hackles too. His relationship with his stepmother has really evolved since those difficult early years, but the fact she is now disrespecting his wife is putting it to the test again. This is the thing about the tension between William and Camilla that makes it different from a simple personality clash or a family disagreement rooted in old history. It is not just about Diana anymore. It is not just about the past. It is about Kate. It is about the children. It is about what William is building for the future and whether Camilla is going to be an asset or an obstacle in that project. Yahoo! And then there is the question of how the situation became even more publicly visible with an incident at Peter Philip's June 2026 wedding. The two were at war after allegedly getting into an argument at Peter Philip's wedding. Reports claim that Camilla blocked Harriet's access to any royal jewelry, including pieces belonging to her now mother-in-law, Princess Anne. What makes that particular incident significant is not just the dispute itself, but the timing and the setting. This was a family wedding. It was supposed to be a celebration, a moment of shared joy inside a family that has had very little of it in recent years. And instead it became the latest in a series of moments where the underlying tension inside the royal family found a way to the surface. Stylcaster. Royal observers who commented on that incident noted that it was symptomatic of something larger. Camilla, in her role as queen, had chosen to exercise a kind of authority over a family moment in a way that was experienced as territorial and controlling. And William, who had long been managing his feelings toward her with careful professional distance, was once again placed in the position of watching the woman his father loves behave in ways that create problems rather than solve them. This is the underlying dynamic that has defined the relationship between William and Camilla for years. Not open warfare, not dramatic scenes or public accusations, but a steady, grinding friction between two people who have very different ideas about what the royal family should look like and who should hold power within it. William is planning for a future. Camilla is protecting a present, and the space between those two projects is where the real tension lives. What the British public sees in the carefully managed photographs and the polished press releases and the smiling appearances at charity events and state occasions is a family that has found a way to function. What is actually happening beneath that managed surface is a negotiation that has never been formally acknowledged and never been fully resolved. A negotiation about history and power and inheritance, and what it means to belong to something as strange and as loaded as the British royal family. And that negotiation is about to enter its most consequential phase. If Camilla outlives the king, she will see his heir, Prince William, step up to the plate in a process that will be immediate and automatic upon Charles' death. William's ascension to the throne will happen simultaneously with his wife Kate Middleton becoming his queen consort. This move will not strip Camilla of her former royal status entirely. The mother of two will inherit a new title, Queen Dowager. That title is not nothing. It carries dignity. It carries a formal place in the royal family. But it is also, unmistakably, a step back. And for a woman who has spent decades fighting her way forward, who has endured levels of public hostility that would have broken most people, and who now, in the final years of her husband's reign, holds a title and a role that represent the culmination of everything she worked toward. The prospect of becoming Queen Dowager is not a comfortable one. Tyler. When it comes to her current responsibilities, it will be William's prerogative as to whether she keeps them up after the king's death. Royal commentators have largely divided views on this matter, given that Camilla has always had a tense relationship with William and his brother Harry. The word prerogative is important there. It is not a matter of law. It is a matter of the new king's discretion, his choice, his judgment. And that means that Camilla's future, in a very real and practical sense, will depend on decisions made by a man who has never fully trusted her, who watched her navigate his father's illness in ways he found troubling, and who carries within him the memory of a 15-year-old boy and everything that boy had to witness. Tyler. This is not a small thing. This is the central tension of the story, and it is still unfolding. There is a particular kind of waiting that defines life inside the British royal family. It is not the ordinary kind of waiting that ordinary people experience. It is waiting with constitutional dimensions. Waiting that is embedded in bloodlines and succession laws, and the slow, unalterable movement of time through an institution that has been reshaping itself, carefully and often painfully, for centuries. Everyone inside the palace walls is waiting for something. Charles is waiting to see how his health holds. William is waiting for the moment that will change his life entirely. Kate is waiting to be queen. And Camilla is waiting to find out whether the life she has spent decades building will survive the transition that is coming. That transition is not hypothetical. It is not distant. It is the kind of thing that royal advisors, constitutional experts, and senior palace officials are already quietly preparing for. Because the question of what happens to Camilla when William becomes king is not just a matter of family dynamics or personal relationships. It has legal and constitutional dimensions that require careful navigation, and it has public perception dimensions that will require even more careful handling. Under long-standing royal and constitutional precedent, the wife of a reigning monarch is styled as queen consort, a title that denotes her status as spouse to the sovereign, but confers no ruling power. Camilla, who was named queen consort following Charles's accession in 2022, holds this designation in both formal usage and public life. But the moment Charles is no longer the reigning monarch, that designation changes. She will not retain the Queen Camilla title if she is alive to see William succeed Charles, instead being Queen Dowager as the widow of the departed king. The title of Queen Dowager is a historic one. It is dignified, but it is fundamentally a title of the past, a recognition of who you were rather than a statement of who you are now. Royal Central Royal Insider. And that distinction between past and present, between the power you held and the power you no longer hold, is at the heart of everything Camilla has been thinking about, according to the people who know her best. Camilla wants Charles to hold on to power for as long as possible, as she loves her responsibilities and does not want to let it go so fast. Every engagement she attends, every state function she participates in, every piece of royal protocol she fulfills is, among other things, a statement. I am here. I belong here. This is mine. Because she knows that the day she stops being able to say those things in the way she currently says them is approaching, and that when it arrives, it will arrive not gradually but all at once. The list. The transition from Queen Consort to Queen Dowager is not just a title change. It is a complete restructuring of daily life, of public role, of personal identity. After William takes the throne, some of Queen Camilla's royal workload will likely change. It may well be that William sees it fitting for Kate to fill her stepmother-in-law's shoes in many of her professional capacities. Camilla currently holds patronages with more than 90 charities. She has built relationships, causes, advocacy positions that span decades. Those are not small things. Those represent real connections, real commitments, real impact in areas like literacy, domestic abuse support, and arts funding. The question of whether those roles transfer to Kate or remain with Camilla is one that William will have the authority to answer. And the way he answers it will tell the public something significant about what kind of king he intends to be. The list. There is a version of this story where William, elevated to the throne and freed from the constraints of being the heir rather than the king, chooses generosity. He confirms Camilla in her patronages. He finds a role for her that is dignified and meaningful. He honors his father's love for this woman by treating her with the respect that love deserves. That version exists. It is possible. And there are people close to William who believe it is the most likely outcome, who point to the years of careful relationship building between William and his stepmother as evidence that the two of them have, in their own complicated way, found a kind of working peace. One of Camilla's family friends told us weekly that William has warmed up to his stepmother over time, adding that they share a familial relationship these days. That is meaningful. It suggests that whatever the temperature in the room during their more difficult moments, there is also something that has grown between them over the years, something that is not warmth exactly but is not hostility either. It is the particular bond that forms between people who have survived the same losses and shared the same burdens and learned, over time, to see each other as part of the same story rather than competing chapters within it. The Royal Observer. But there is also another version of this story. One where the accumulated friction of years, the arguments over Charles's health, the disputes at family gatherings, the moments where Camilla's territorial instincts have collided with William's vision for the future, where all of that history produces a different kind of outcome. One where William, as king, makes a series of quiet decisions that gradually reduce the scope of Camilla's public role. Not dramatically, not in a way that invites the kind of headlines that would embarrass the family, but steadily, carefully, in the way that powerful people make their preferences felt without ever being so direct that they can be publicly challenged on it. Royal expert Christopher Anderson claimed that Camilla's role in the monarchy may be reevaluated, but she will probably still partake in some royal engagements here and there. The phrase reevaluated is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. It is a diplomatic way of describing something that could range from minor adjustments to significant restructuring. And the man making those evaluations will be William, who has been thinking about the kind of monarchy he wants to build for most of his adult life. The Royal Observer. Joe Little, managing editor of Majesty magazine, said the new King William would call all the shots, and it would be down to him in accordance with his father's and stepmother's wishes, of course. But every aspect of her public and private life would be reviewed. That word reviewed is significant. In the context of royal life, where stability and continuity are prized above almost everything else, the idea that every aspect of someone's public and private life is subject to review represents a fundamental shift in the nature of their position. Camilla has spent years operating from a place of security, of confirmed status, of royal blessing that came ultimately from Charles. When Charles is gone, that foundation changes. The Royal Observer. The question of where she lives is also part of this picture. In August 2024, some people speculated Charles might eventually want Camilla to live at Royal Lodge, the current home of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. A royal commentator told Talk TV that he wants to have a space for her in a private area close enough to the family and close enough to where she will be safe. Royal residences aside, Camilla is fortunate to have another housing option. Since the mid-1990s, Camilla has owned Ray Mill House, an opulent estate with spacious grounds, described as the only place where she can literally and metaphorically kick off her shoes and spend time with family and friends in a really informal setting. That private retreat matters. It gives Camilla somewhere to go that is genuinely hers, something that belongs to her and not to the crown, not to the institution, not to the man whose death will reshape her public identity entirely. The list. And what about Charles himself? What is he doing in this final chapter of his reign to prepare for a future that will arrive whether anyone is ready for it or not? King Charles bestowed the title of Vice Admiral of the United Kingdom on Queen Camilla, making her the first woman to hold the honorary title. That gesture was widely understood in royal circles as a deliberate attempt by Charles to cement Camilla's place in the historical record of the British monarchy, to give her something that would exist on paper regardless of what decisions were made after him. It is an act of love, but it is also an act of strategy. A father protecting a person he loves from the consequences of a future he cannot fully control. Yahoo! Because Charles knows something that nobody in the palace talks about openly, but that everyone understands. When William becomes king, the dynamic shifts completely. The careful equilibrium that Charles has maintained, balancing his love for Camilla against his son's complicated feelings, balancing Camilla's ambitions against William's vision for the future of the crown, that balance disappears. William will not be balancing anything. He will be deciding. Princess Diana's astrologer Debbie Frank predicted that King Charles and Queen Camilla's relationship dynamic would change significantly, and that Camilla would step back from duties that the younger royals could perform. She said Camilla's role will be clearly defined from April onwards with a firm strategy in place, and that she will still be a powerful force behind the throne. Whether you give any weight to astrological predictions or not, that framing captures something that multiple royal experts and insiders have been saying in more straightforward terms. The future for Camilla is one of redefinition, not disappearance, not exile, but a stepping back that is, in its own way, its own kind of loss. AOL. And then there is the question of what the British public will make of all of this, because the British public has always been the final court of appeal in the story of the royal family. They are the ones who ultimately decide whether a narrative is acceptable or not, whether a royal figure is beloved or merely tolerated, whether the institution is serving them or failing them. And on the question of Camilla, the public remains genuinely divided. Polls conducted in 2024 and into 2025 reveal that while many Britons accept her public duties, including state banquets and diplomatic tour, polling shows that symbolic recognition lags behind functional acceptance of her role. Different outlets emphasize different aspects of her public standing, and these divergent framings reflect ongoing ambivalence. Visibility helps, but visibility alone has not erased generational, regional, and partisan divides that define how the British public currently views Camilla as queen consort. That ambivalence is Camilla's permanent condition. She has earned a place in the institution through sheer persistence and decades of committed service, but she has never fully earned a place in the public's heart. And in a monarchy that depends on emotional legitimacy as much as legal authority, that gap matters, factually. William understands this. He has grown up watching it. He has seen the way public affection for his mother never faded, how Diana's image remained so powerful, so present, so emotionally resonant for so many people, even 30 years after her death. He has seen the way his own popularity and Kate's popularity dwarf the numbers that even the king and queen consort achieve, and he has drawn conclusions from all of that. Conclusions about what works and what does not, about what kind of royal family the British public wants to believe in, about what stories need to be told and what stories need to be set aside. Camilla's story is not one that ends neatly. It does not have the kind of resolution that satisfies completely. She is too complicated a figure for that. She has been the villain of one of the most watched family dramas in modern history, and she has also been, in her own quietly determined way, a genuinely effective queen consort who has served the crown with consistency and professionalism. Both of those things are true at the same time. And the tension between them is something that the British public and William will be working through for years to come. What William has signaled, through his actions and his words and the careful positioning of his public image and his family's, is that he is building something different. A monarchy that is smaller, more focused, more attuned to the realities of the modern world. A monarchy where every person who bears a royal title is expected to justify that title through active and meaningful service. And in that monarchy, the question of what role a queen dowager in her 80s plays is one that will need a clear and honest answer. That answer, when it comes, will be shaped by everything that has come before. By a young boy watching his mother give a television interview. By two brothers pleading with their father in a conversation that changed nothing. By years of state functions and family weddings and quiet arguments about a man's health and a woman's future. By the accumulated weight of grief and history and the particular kind of love that exists between a father and his son, when both of them are trying to do right by the people they love, and finding that the right thing is not always the same thing. William has not made any grand public announcement about Camilla's future. He has not needed to. The reality of royal succession means that when the time comes, the decisions will be made without fanfare, without drama, in the way that the most consequential things inside institutions like this are always made. Quietly, deliberately, with an eye on history and an awareness of consequences that stretches far beyond the immediate moment. But the nation is watching, the world is watching. And the story of what comes next, of how William navigates his inheritance and what place, if any, Camilla holds within it, is not finished yet. It is still being written. By a king in his autumn years who loves his wife and fears for her future. By a woman who fought her way from the most hated woman in Britain to queen consort and is not ready to stop fighting. And by a prince, now a man, now almost a king himself, who carries within him everything that makes this story not just a political question or a constitutional one, but a deeply, irreducibly human one. The story of William and Camilla is not over. It is only entering its most important chapter.